All right, so I just rode up to my dad's house. We're gonna be doing the install for the Ford 8.8 on the back of his Jeep Wrangler TJ. Funny enough, that Ford 8.8 came out of the back of my white YJ, and it's going on the back of his and my old Jeep Wrangler TJ. If you didn't know already, my name's Dylan. I'm the owner and editor of BreakingBolts.com. I cover everything rock crawling, off-road, overland, Jeeps, and even Toyotas. Go check out my website. So I picked up this Jeep Wrangler TJ about 2 years ago for $5,000. It needed a lot of work. I did a top end on it, put on a small lift kit, small body lift, and then replaced the fender flares on it. I eventually sold it to my dad so I could go out and buy a buggy that ended up being a complete nightmare. And now I'm back in that white YJ. The Ford 8.8 we built up over the last couple months as we went. It's got 488s, a Spartan locker, and a Barnes four-wheel drive truss on the top. The Dana 30 high pinion has 488 gears, an ARB air locker, and even RCV axle shafts. There's really no good way to disassemble the rear. Grab some sockets and a couple wrenches and start unbolting things. Some say you'd save a lot of time if you just organize your sockets every once in a while, but I guess when you're working for yourself, you can work for free too, huh? These Barnes four-wheel drive trusses for the Jeep TJ, they go together so well. Really, you don't need much prior knowledge to install one of these things that all tabs and keys together. You just got to know a little bit of welding to get it done. But if you got some buddies, and I'm sure they can get it welded together for you. This Dana 30 high pinion is going to be such a good upgrade for this Jeep TJ, especially with those RCV shafts. Running 35s is really not going to be a problem on it. For us, it was a lot easier just to leave the wheels and tires on while we took the small things off, like the drive shaft, the parking brakes, the brake lines, the sway bars, and even the track bar. But once you get the small things off, go ahead and move on to taking off the wheels and tires to get the control arms off and the upper control arms off. At this point, you'll basically see your rear axle wanting to fall out by itself, but once those coil springs are out, you can let that jack stand down. There's really not much to this whole process. You just start unbolting things and it's going to come out eventually. If you're wondering exactly how long it takes, it took us, with 2 people, about 3 hours to take out. And that's mainly because it took about 2 hours to get the clips off the parking brake. The factory Dana 35 on a Jeep TJ is about the weight of an obese golden retriever soaking wet. You may want to consider having 2 people to move it, but if you got an engine hoist, anything's possible. If your shiny new Ford 8.8 is ready to go, then go ahead and move it over and prep it for surgery. But if you're like most people and took out your rear axle in preparation for your new Ford 8.8 because you wanted to get the Jeep ready for an axle swap, well, go ahead and cover your Jeep up and let it sit there for the next 6 months to get your axle project done. We all know it's going to happen, so just admit it now. Installing that new axle poses a bit more of a problem than taking out the factory Dana 35. Well, that's mainly because all the tinfoil brackets and tinfoil control arms that Jeep gave us on our factory TJs don't exactly like going into their new home, but eventually, with the help of a hammer and some extra motivation, they'll give up and let the new axle fall into place. Rough country, lower control arms. Yeah. And $8,000 in axles.
Yes, sir. Gotta start somewhere.
I can speak for those who are going to use the Barnes four-wheel drive truss system for the Jeep TJ. When doing this swap, all of the factory components will bolt right up to the system. We did, however, for safety's sake, go ahead and purchase a JKS adjustable track bar for the rear. We're using the adjustable track bar as a fail-safe just in case the installation of the truss was just a bit off. If it was off just by half an inch or a quarter of an inch, we can pull it back into place with that adjustable track bar. It's not required to get the track bar, but if you're like us and don't really want to mess with it later, then go ahead and get it. The JKS track bar was around $240, so it's not too much of an expense for that safety. The other part we did purchase was an adapter to adapt the factory drive shaft to the yoke on the differential. That part was around $100, $10 in shipping. You'll find when you're down to just one more lower control arm to put on that it's going to be more of a pain than the rest of them to put on. That rule also applies to the second coil spring you put on. The second one's always harder. The right tool for the job to get the second coil spring on is a coil spring compressor, but us being rock crawlers, we don't always have the right tools. A ratchet strap at the end of the day will get you to point B just as quick. You're in the home stretch now, so go ahead and jack the axle up to compress the coil springs. You can reinstall your track bar, your shocks, your brakes, your drive shaft, and your parking brakes. From this point, instead of leaving it on jack stands, we put the track bar on, put the wheels and tires back on, and did the finishing step with the wheels and tires on just for safety. You may need to use a ratchet strap just to install the track bar in case the axle is misaligned just a bit. You can attach the ratchet strap from your axle to the other side of the frame. Once it's pulled in place, shove that bolt in and you're good to go.